I started getting bullied in school at the age of 13 or 14, and then I took my first overdose. So that led to me going into King's Hospital for a week and a bit, and then I saw more mental health professionals. They didn't think it was an issue, so I got discharged. And then during that time and afterwards, I carried on running away from home because I didn't want to talk to anyone about how I was feeling. And then I ended up getting, 136 by a police officer. First time I'd been handcuffed, first time I'd been pinned to the floor. And then they had to explain that they were detaining me for my safety. And then they told me that I was going to a unit, and I didn't know what that was either. And then I was just like, well, they were like, you're going to a mental health unit. I met Sally while she was doing a BBC Radio 4 documentary about mental health, and then we started talking and I told her about wanting to make this film, and we realised we could work together.
Tiffany's had a really tough time, and there have been a number of things that happened in her early life which I think are quite difficult for most people to get their heads around. But not just one thing, there's been a kind of series of things. So she was taken into care when she was younger. She was adopted, the adoption failed, and she'd been adopted away from her siblings. She was returned to care, she was assaulted in care. There was then a second adoption. And for anybody who's involved with mental health, I think for the world in general, and you know, anybody who's watching this film, wouldn't come as a great surprise to hear that by her early teens, Tiffany was struggling with mental health problems, and really quite serious mental health problems.
I wanted to make this film because, well, people don't understand what it's like to be an inpatient. I called it Mind the Gap 17 to 25 because, well, it's an age gap that people struggle to deal with in the mental health system. The transition between adolescence and adult mental health services. I want people to know that the transition is really difficult. There's so many more ways which you can make it easier for young people. I guess when I was transitioned, I felt abandoned. It literally felt like I'd been shoved onto another island where I knew no one. No matter what anyone said, it was just like robots were talking at you. It felt like I couldn't connect with anyone because there was just such a gap.
How does it feel like revisiting this?
Weird. Quite weird. Like, the majority of it hasn't changed, but like, obviously, the people have.
Yeah.
And,
What would a regular day look like for you?
The main structure was to go to school, and then we'd go to school for about 2 hours, have a break, go back again.
Because this is quite an unusual hospital in that it's got a school, because not all
Yeah.
hospitals have them. What was that like still to have that routine of school? Do you think that was a helpful thing, or do you?
I think it was helpful because if we didn't have it, there'd just be a lot of thinking time. And it sounds weird, but that often doesn't do people very much good, especially when you're in here. Your mind begins to wander when you have nothing to do. If you're left to think about it, it's eventually going to go down a negative path. This specific unit, they would adapt to the way you were working with them and how you were feeling. So for me, I was a runner.
What does that mean?
I like to run away from places quite a bit. No,
So did you try and run away from here?
quite a few times, yeah.
And how would you do that?
So I used to climb over the garden fence
Right.
and a metal gate and then run
And where would you run to?
anywhere, just as long as it wasn't here.
And how did you end up being brought back?
By police.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. What is it that happens here that's different?
They wouldn't look at you as what the diagnosis you had was. They'd look at you as the individual person and what you like doing and what distractions you'd be capable of doing to help yourself, instead of looking at, oh, you've got this diagnosis, so this works for most people, which means it's going to work for you. Or they wouldn't just shove you on meds to like calm you down. They'd work with you and work with what meds you wanted.
So it feels like treatment was kind of a joint
Effort, yeah.
effort.
It was a two-way thing. It didn't feel like it was being forced upon you and you had to have it and you had no other option. It felt like it was workable, and if you didn't like it, it was a manageable thing to change. It didn't feel like a fight in here against doctors and nurses. They get to know you as an individual, so they realise when you're about to break, if you're breaking down, or if you need support, if you're just genuinely managing and all right.
Tell me a little bit about the transition from CAMS to adult services.
So I had a very messy transition actually. So it was thought about for a year and a half before I was 18. And then I ended up getting sent to an adult unit 5 days before my 18th birthday, which means I was put on one-to-one because...
One-to-one, what does that mean?
So you have a staff member watching you all the time, including when you go to the bathroom. So pleasant. Because of either your safety or someone else's safety. And it was mainly because I was not an adult in numbers yet. And everyone else was, so it was for my safety to be protected against adults.
So you were transferred, and for 5 days you were watched one-to-one, and then what happened?
I was left to do what I wanted.
So until you were 18, you were deemed to be at risk from the others, but on your 18th birthday you no longer were, magically.
Yeah.
You were able to look after
because I was 18.
yourself.
The magic of being 18. Happy birthday to me.
This was a residential unit, the adult unit? Was
No,
No.
inpatient.
Inpatient unit. And what was that, what was it like?
Awful. It was like a smack in the face. A very big smack in the face.
In what way?
So everyone was older than me, apart from one other person who was 25. Everyone else was much older than me, like 35 plus. I didn't have similarities with many people. It felt like people were there for more serious disorders, like they weren't really with it all the time. So you couldn't make conversation because they just wouldn't make sense and you wouldn't understand what was going on.
And it sounds like the friendships and the, you know, as you described it, chilling out in this room, that was really part of your life when you were here, but there was none of that in adult services.
No. So you could wake up whenever you want.
No school, of course, yeah.
No school, no education. They would have maybe one group a day, but it wasn't compulsory. It was just like you can go to the art room, everyone's going to the art room. If you want to go to the art room, go and draw.
So it's less structured.
Yeah, there was no structure there at all. The only structure was to wake up for your meds, take your meds, and then do whatever you want. On one of my nights when I was 17, a staff member got beaten up in front of me by another patient. And like, there was only 2 staff members on that night and one of them was on my one-to-one. Like, it wasn't safe at all. It was crazy. No.
And were you expecting it to be like
No.
that? Or did you think it would just be a continuation of the...
I think I was hoping it would be a continuation.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It was soon as well, not even that, when I was 17. And everything changed. Like, I knew no one. I didn't know anything that would happen. I didn't know any patients. I didn't know any staff. I didn't know any therapists. Didn't receive therapy.
No therapy?
I didn't specifically. Some people would have therapy, but I didn't.
And why do you think there are those 2 different approaches? From the outside, you might naively assume that they're all the same, but it sounds like you've had really different experiences.
Yeah, it's sad, and to me it's still shocking, and I've been in both of them.
Yeah.
Like,
So why do you think there are those differences then?
I think it's because people don't have you can't have a straight understanding of mental health. But then I think if it doesn't work as much as that unit doesn't work, you should be willing to change it. But people like read a rule and then they expect it to work like just that way, and there's no way of incorporating that rule in your practice. Whereas here, like Dr. Corrigle's reading a rule and then he's seeing both sides of that rule and he's using it to the best of the ability with the person he's looking after.
So it's a sort of a flexibility.
Yeah.
And it even sounds like there's a bit of innovation, perhaps. in terms of...
Like, rules here aren't broken. Like, they're just used in the right way.
What about, you said that for you there had been sort of planning for 18 months before you went. How planned did it feel?
Not at all. It was all last minute. Even though there was 18 months worth of planning, like, I didn't know anything that was going on until about 2 days before I left. Like, no one else did either. And when I got there, they didn't even realise I was coming. So it wasn't that well planned out.
So although people were making noises about planning and saying it was being planned, it sounds like it...
It was just a bunch of confusion. It was about waiting for people to respond to assessments, people hearing what I was like and then being like, oh no, she's too risky, but then she's too unrisky to be in this type of place. And then people just going, oh, we can't have her. And then last minute going, oh, we've got a bed, so we might as well take her. There wasn't any planning to it.
And you were aware of all that uncertainty while it was happening?
Yeah.
So what did that feel like?
Made everything 100 times worse. I was trying to run off more, I was trying to escape. I thought if I ran away, then I wouldn't have to put up with it. I wouldn't know what was going on. They wouldn't be able to send me anywhere because I wasn't there to be sent anywhere. So I just left.
So there's a sort of almost a re-traumatising, isn't there?
It doesn't help, it just embeds everything that's going on for you. When you're sitting there in a meeting and they're going, she's too risky because she does this, this and this, so she can't be sent here. But then there's other places going, she's not risky enough, so she can't be sent here. So then when you start running away and you start doing more self-harming behaviours, they're like, oh, because she's now becoming more risky, she's no longer deemable to go here, even though they said before I wasn't able to go there.
And it sounds like a kind of the system driving you to crisis before it could respond.
Yeah.
Was that
There was bits where they could have just stopped and thought about things, but they were just more concerned about the deadline of my birthday.
And what's your relationship with adult services now?
So I have what's called like a community team. So they're people you can live at home or wherever you live in, and then go and see them whenever you have an appointment. And it's not a hospital setting, it's just like a meeting room, one-to-one. And then if they need to change meds, they'll tell you. If you want to change your meds, you tell them. And you're basically in charge of your own care.
And do you feel that that's the right approach for you now, for you to be in charge of your own care?
It feels safer now going to that community team than it did being in that hospital. Like in that hospital, it was just like a war zone half the time. People were just like fighting each other. It was crazy. We didn't feel safe.
What message would you give about what needs to change?
Make a unit in between. The 17 to 25 unit, like, it's going to be the same half problem when they're 25, but you can't just ship a 17-year-old to an adult unit where there's just 40-plus-year-olds. It doesn't work.
So to have a unit which bridged
The two
gap.
together.
Yeah.
Where it starts preparing you for changes from adolescents to adults. Because you're not going to change your thinking overnight. It's not going to be like, oh, you're 18 now, so you think like an adult. It's never like that. Even some adults don't think like adults. So I don't see why everything should just switch at the change of a button.
I guess what I'm still trying to get at is what's the kind of the magic formula?
There ain't one. It's mental health. There's never going to be a magic formula. It's just about adaptation to what's going on nowadays. And people aren't willing to do that, so nothing's going to get better if you're not willing to change things.
So adapting to the circumstances of the individual. Yeah.
You can't have one rule for every single mental health patient. It's never going to work like that.
But because it's the race to the bottom in terms of money, that's what we do. Yeah.
It's just about, nowadays it just seems more about filling in forms and ticking all the boxes to what they've been told to do than it is about the individual person in front of them. Like, they don't see that anymore. It's just like an assessment list that they have to tick off. Things today are a lot better. I've met Oscar, who's made, well, a phenomenal difference to my life in a way. He's learning when I'm going downwards or feeling rubbish, and then he's learned when I know my space, but how long to give me before like asking or trying to push talking about the situation. Now you're in a relationship, you've got to think about the other person as well, and like he really does that with me, but now I'm starting to do that more with him, and it's really nice. And then when you feel the care between both of you, it's even better.
When you work on a project like this and you hear from someone like Tiffany the good that she experienced when she was in Snowsfields, and then the not good that she experienced when she was moved to adult services, I don't know what the solution is, but I know it's not right as it is right now. I would like to think that this film could start a discussion and could maybe start getting people to understand that it might be time for a change.
What I'd like to say to people watching this film is it would really help if they planned it better instead of leaving it for 1 or 2 weeks before my birthday. I think they should cut down forms. I think if a patient's progress is being detailed and how the teams behind them are doing that, I think that should simply be enough of an evidence-based thing. I think some bits that needed to change were staff's attitudes a lot of the time. I feel people just assume they know everything because they've heard of that diagnosis or that name of whatever it's called, and then everyone who has that fits in it because of that way. And I think things need to be more adaptable. Mental health isn't predictable, so people's attitudes to it shouldn't be either.